Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. We are very happy to welcome at Ukraine Crisis Media Center U.S. Congressional Delegation, Senator Kelly Ayotte, Senator Joe Donnelly, and Representative Stephen Lynch. Welcome.
First of all, I want to thank Natalia. I want to thank the Center for making this facility available for us. My name is Kelly Ayotte, and I represent the state of New Hampshire in the United States Senate. And with me, I have Joe Donnelly, who represents the Senate, the state of Indiana in the United States Senate, and Congressman Stephen Lynch, who represents the state of Massachusetts in the United States House of Representatives. We are very honored to be here today and to come here to visit the country of Ukraine. Today we had the opportunity to meet with the Ukrainian Prime Minister as well as key members of the cabinet and his leadership team to get a briefing on what is happening on the ground here in Ukraine, to discuss not only with the Prime Minister but with other leaders of the government the role of the United States of America and what support we can provide here. We were also able to discuss with them the illegal actions of the Russian government, in particular Vladimir Putin, in annexing the territory of Ukraine in Crimea. And so those were a big part of the discussions we had today. And today we also had the opportunity to go down to Maidan Square and to really see firsthand thousands and thousands of Ukrainians protesting the Russian invasion and annexation of Crimea, expressing their viewpoints in the square very clearly. And we stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people, who we heard time and time again today from them, from their leadership. And we also had an opportunity to meet with representatives of the major parties who will be participating in the election upcoming in May. We heard from everyone that we spoke to that the Ukrainian people want free and fair elections in May, that they want to have prosperity and democracy, and to decide what the future of Ukraine will be without interference from Russia, without interference from any other country, but really with assistance and friendship from countries like the United States of America and our NATO allies to help the country of Ukraine go forward with free and democratic elections in May, to succeed, to prosper. And this trip was very important to us because we see so much promise here in the country of Ukraine. We saw the patriotism of the Ukrainians, not only in seeing what they've sacrificed, and I want to offer, and we all want to offer our condolences to those who gave their life for the freedom of Ukraine, and to the families who lost loved ones in Maidan Square. We had the opportunity there to pay tribute to those who gave so much for their country. But what we have seen is the courage, the bravery of the Ukrainian people. They're willing to make sacrifice for freedom and democracy, and that is all very inspiring and encouraging to us and to the United States of America. What happens in Ukraine is very, very important, not only to the Ukrainian people, but to the United States of America, to the world, because it is very important that the people of Ukraine be permitted to decide their future. What we have seen with the invasion of Crimea, we have seen the illegal actions of Vladimir Putin and the Russian government. And my message to President Putin would be to respect the sovereignty of the country of Ukraine, to take no further action that infringes on the territory of Ukraine. Yet we have seen, obviously, that there are Russian troops on the border of eastern Ukraine. Just yesterday, 3 Russian armed agents were arrested in eastern Ukraine, and what they were doing was trying to disrupt the peace in eastern Ukraine. What they were trying to do is fabricate objections and controversy in eastern Ukraine. And so we need to understand that not only have the Russians illegally taken action in Crimea, which we will not accept, but we are also seeing some actions of concern that they need to stop now and respect the sovereignty of Ukraine. As we stand here today, I believe that the actions taken by our President Obama, in imposing sanctions on certain Russian individuals who are within the circle of Vladimir Putin, individuals who have taken actions to interfere in Ukraine's sovereignty, also former officials, including President Yanukovych, who have not only participated in corruption here, but also have interfered with the wishes and beliefs of the Ukrainian, that those were very appropriate actions, and I support our president for having issued those sanctions. That said, I look forward to us doing more to send an even stronger message to President Putin that he must stop taking any further actions that interfere with the sovereignty of the Ukrainian people. With that, I hope that President Putin understands that the American people, that we can take further actions, and I certainly would recommend that we take further actions of economic sanctions against the Russians, including economic sanctions on their entire financial sector that will have a negative impact on the economy of Russia. And that is not to harm the Russian people, but that is to send a message to Vladimir Putin and to his leadership that we will not accept further aggression from him. With regard to Ukraine or any other of our allies. So tomorrow in the United States Senate, the Senate will be taking up legislation that pertains to Ukraine. In fact, that legislation will provide loan guarantees, $1 billion in loan guarantees to the Ukraine. I look forward to supporting that legislation. In addition, that legislation does contain the authority for sanctions, although the President has already taken steps to issue sanctions, and I believe that we can take further steps to issue even stronger sanctions, as I have just outlined, including sanctions on the entire Russian financial sector, to ensure that the message is clear that we will not continue to accept the illegal annexation of the Russians in Crimea. In addition to that, what we heard today from the Ukrainian leadership is that the prior president, Yanukovych, took steps to gut the Ukrainian military. I know that the leadership in Ukraine has already taken very strong steps to strengthen their military, and that the people of Ukraine are working together to ensure their security. However, the United States of America, I serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee. As we return to Washington, I will recommend that we provide further security assistance to the Ukrainian military. And when I say that, I'm not talking about American or NATO troops here. The Ukrainian people will be the ones to decide their future. But we can provide military assistance, not only humanitarian assistance, but assistance that can involve small arms, communications equipment, basic fuel issues that we need, uniform issues, things that the Ukrainian military will need as it rebuilds the damage that was done by President Yanukovych that is already being addressed by the current leadership. Finally, this is an important time in the world. This is an important time not only for the government of Ukraine, but I believe for our NATO partnership, and that I will recommend certainly to our president and to the members of the Senate Armed Services Committee in the Senate that if we have an opportunity, that we should continue to increase support for our allies in the region, particularly our allies in the countries surrounding the country of Ukraine, including the Poland, Czechoslovakia, and other Baltic countries. We can increase our NATO force presence in these countries. They have already requested that we do that, and I believe that we should take that action. Finally, you know, the Russian economy is a one-trick pony, and it is founded on oil and natural gas. And I believe we have an opportunity in partnership with our European partners to look toward a new, stronger energy policy that reduces the dependency of both Europe and also the country of Ukraine on Russian natural gas and oil. And we are blessed in the United States of America to have energy resources and new technology to recover those energy resources. So in the longer term, I would urge our president to expedite the ability of our country to expedite liquefied natural gas, to look at our energy policy in conjunction with our European partners for a longer-term solution to all of our energy needs that would reduce our dependency on Russian oil and gas, and would also not only provide for future independence, but would also send a message to the Russians that we're very serious about having them and having President Putin be a responsible player in the international community, in contrast to the behavior that we have seen with regard to Ukraine and in other instances around the world. Because what we have seen is someone who is not ready to be part of a peaceful international community. We have seen someone who is acting like his history, like a former KGB colonel. And that is not worthy of the Russian people, and it is not worthy of peace and prosperity in the world. With that, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Joe Donnelly.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with Senator Ayotte, my friend, Congressman Steve Lynch from Massachusetts. We want to thank everybody at the embassy for an extraordinarily well-done job, and how grateful we are for your help today. I wanted to mention very quickly, I'm going to get into a few steps I think are important, but I wanted to mention how sorry we are and our condolences on the losses at the Maidan. And to let you know, when we were walking around there today, we saw so many extraordinary people. We saw so many heartbreaking monuments. But while we were there, this mom came up with 3 young girls. They're probably 8, 9, 10 years old. And they came up and said, "Are you from the U.S.?" And we said, "We are." And the 3 young girls looked at us and sang the national anthem of Ukraine and knew every single word. And they finished and said, "We love our country." And that sums up, for us, this entire trip. We feel very privileged to have met with the Prime Minister, the other government officials, and in talking to them, they said to us, and we also said to them, how important it was that all the parts of Ukraine know that they are part of this effort as a team, that we reach out to all regions of Ukraine so all the people feel a part of it, that everyone in Ukraine is shoulder to shoulder, and they are. If we heard one thing from one minister to the next minister to the other folks we met with tonight, it was this: Ukraine is ready to fight. Every single person from every corner. The individuals we met with said, not 1 square meter further of Ukraine soil. If they do, the fight starts right there. And we told them how much we admired them, how much we admired the spirit of this country, and we will work together. I also feel that President Obama put sanctions in place. Those are important. We also support energy sanctions as well, or I should say I do. And financial sanctions across the entire spectrum. And also visa policies should be looked at as well. And I think one of the things President Putin is going to regret the most is that by his actions, he has stirred up an entire continent. He has stirred up countries all throughout the region who have said we will never be dependent on President Putin for natural gas or for energy needs or for anything else ever again. And so it is a privilege to be here, as I said. We want to make sure that everyone knows we are friends, we are brothers and sisters with the Ukraine people, and we stand together. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Steve Lynch. I'm the United States Congressman for the 8th Congressional District of Massachusetts, and obviously radioactive here.
You really got him bad.
Yeah. But do I have a phone? It's off. Okay? All right. Let me begin by, as my colleagues have, in offering my condolences. And it was we spent a couple of hours today in the Maidan talking with families and visiting the memorials. We had one of our Marines from our embassy who was actually on the ground the day of the major shootings of so many of those who lost their lives on the 20th of February. And we heard just the heart-wrenching stories of how unarmed protesters were gunned down in cold blood. It was a mix today. We heard full-throated resistance from the Ukrainian people during the protest, but we also saw a collective trauma that the Ukrainian people were feeling because of the loss that they suffered. But it's that type of response and the valiant resistance and the defense of personal freedoms that really gets to the heart of the issue and speaks to the rightness of the position of the Ukrainian people. I associate myself with the remarks. I don't want to repeat what my two colleagues have said. But I do want to speak to the members of NATO, the member countries of NATO. We need to think long and hard about what has happened here. In the agreement that was signed in Budapest, signed by the United States, signed by Britain, signed, yes, by Russia and others, the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian government, gave up hundreds of nuclear warheads in return for an agreement, a security agreement, that said, because you are doing the right thing here, because you are contributing to global security by giving up these weapons, and I wear another hat as well. I'm the co-chair of the task force on terrorist financing and nonproliferation in the House. Because the terms of that condition were so clear that if Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, that they would enjoy security within their territorial borders. What has happened here is not only a violation of that agreement, but a violation by one of the signatories who guaranteed the protection of the territorial integrity of Ukraine. So to my colleagues who represent other NATO nations, think about the message this is sending to every other nation who we are asking to relinquish nuclear weapons or the capacity to develop nuclear weapons. The message here, if we let this situation stand, is that they should hang on to their nuclear weapons, because there is no guarantee of territorial integrity without it. That's the wrong message to send. So we should stand together and make sure that we live up to our obligations to reward the Ukraine for doing the right thing, not only in their own interest, but also in the interests of countries around the world. We want to set the right example. And again, tomorrow we are facing the opportunity to pass legislation. Senator Ayotte talked about the Senate legislation. We also have a companion piece in the House that would provide $1 billion in loan guarantees. Plus, there's other language in some of the legislation that would impose stiffer sanctions on the Russian government and also institutions within Russia in retaliation for what they have done here. And I know there's another bill offered by Congressman Ed Royce that is also up for consideration tomorrow. But we understand what is at stake here. We understand the great risk and the great peril that we face here. And I think that the best way to face this is to face this together. Thank you.
Questions? Yes, Margaret.
Margaret Warner from the PBS NewsHour. There are many Ukrainians we've spoken to in the last 10 days in Crimea and in the East and here, who also feel very let down, picking up on your point, Congressman, by the U.S. and Britain, that our countries were signatories to that Budapest Memorandum, and that sanctions are all well and good, but those are very slow instruments, and that the U.S. and Britain owe more in a military sense to defend the territorial integrity of Ukraine. What do you all think of that? Above and beyond what you said, Senator Ayotte.
Well, let me say, Margaret, first of all, that I think the sanctions will have an impact, particularly if we ratchet them up on entire segments of the Russian economy, including the financial sector, as Senator Donnelly mentioned, the energy sector, and that will send a very, very strong message, and not just a message that will hit the Russian economy and their prosperity in a way that I think we've seen it happen in other countries. The reason that Iran is at the negotiating table right now is because we work together with our partners to put in a series of sanctions. So yes, it does take longer, but it does have a real impact when we do that and when we act together. First of all, we are committed, as Congressman Lynch said, the Budapest Memorandum, very important. We were a signatory to that. We stand by that memorandum. And the way we stand by that memorandum is not only through the economic support that we will be voting on in the House and Senate that I'm confident will go forward for Ukraine, but also with the sanctions, and finally on the military support end, we, having met certainly with the leadership here, they aren't asking, and nor are we suggesting that the right thing would be to have United States or NATO boots on the ground here. But I believe we can do more to provide support to the Ukrainian military so that they're better prepared to defend themselves, which in turn would let Russia understand that while the president that they backed may have done harm to the military, we will help rebuild that. Finally, I think that NATO does have a very strong role here. Not only were we signatories, but the United Kingdom signatories and the French to the Budapest, I believe, to the Budapest Memorandum. And so with that, I think that we should be working as NATO and working to ensure that we are looking at increasing our force posture in Eastern Europe. And not necessarily, obviously, boots on the ground here, which I don't think that any of us are really talking about, nor are the leadership here asking for. But the posture in terms of the countries that surround Ukraine and are also bordering Russia to understand that things that the Russians have really not appreciated, they don't want a greater force presence in this region, but now they have gotten it, I believe. In addition, naval presence. We had the USS Truxtun in the Black Sea, and that was here on exercises. We have deployed F-16s in the area. So there's many other military assets we can bring to bear in this region that can support and certainly will make sure that the Russians understand that we have a strong military, that NATO has a strong presence in this region. Finally, I personally believe that we should revisit the decision that President Obama made when he came into office with regard to the missile defense systems in Poland and the Czech Republic. And in those two countries, the president made a decision when he came into office to eliminate the memorandums of understanding or to revisit them as a new president with those two countries. And that was in the hope that we would have a better relationship with Russia. What we have seen, of course, is that Vladimir Putin doesn't want to act like a responsible world leader. Instead, he still wants to act like a schoolyard bully. And so with that regard, I believe that we should revisit our decision there and really reapproach those countries and offer our support for missile defense in those countries, because that missile defense will also be protection for not only us, our interests, but also Europe as well. So I think there are a number of steps we can take, but we are committed to the Budapest Memorandum. Unlike Russia that violated the Budapest Memorandum, we are committed to seeing it through and to following through in partnership with the Ukrainian people, and we stand with them.
President Putin has opened up all types of windows that will cause tremendous damage to Russia. As we were talking about with sanctions, as we have been talking about almost across the board, all the different things that are out there. Russia is the ones who violated this accord. We will provide military help. I expect there will be more forces coming into the area. I expect that we will revisit the missile shield question as well. I expect that the question of energy will be very much on the table at a time when the very best technologies in the world are opening up new areas for natural gas, new areas for oil, every single day. And this technology that's been developed is available to the entire world. And so the cards they're playing, brute force, is a losing card these days. And the Ukrainian people have told us, we don't want boots on the ground. We will be there, meaning the Ukrainian people, we will be there to fight. We need a reliable ally as a partner. And we will be there talking about energy sanctions, financial sanctions, visa issues, and every step they've taken, that Putin has taken, has put his nation's economy in further dire question, with further challenges, and the Ukrainian people have said not one more inch. We stand with the Ukrainian people, and Mr. Putin has to think long and hard about his next step, because there's significant pain on the horizon, not only for him, but for Russia.
Other questions?
Yes, ma'am. Senator Ayotte, Jamie Detmer, Daily Beast. You clearly want more action to be taken by the White House. Would you agree with the comments this weekend by Congressman Mike Roberts that the White House rhetoric is not matching the reality on the ground? So is your trip here as much a message to President Obama as it is to President Putin? Mm-hmm. Secondly, you want to target the financial sector. For that to be effective, you would need to close down the financial markets in London. And there seems to be a reluctance on the part of the British government to do that. How do you persuade your Western European allies to target the Russian financial sector?
I would say, first of all, I appreciate the actions that the President took this week that sanctioned additional individuals, many of whom are in President Putin's inner circle. So I think that those sanctions were significant. However, I do believe that we should go further. And obviously, this is a discussion that we will have in the Congress. I think that's one of the purposes of this trip, is to be able to take back the experience we had here as we have these debates on the floor of the Congress on issues like sanctions. And I would like to see the President not only really validate our support for the Budapest Memorandum, but validate how important the sovereignty of Ukraine is through additional sanctions, through additional military support, and for really by taking, I know that he is traveling and coming, taking some traveling this week, and we'll have an important opportunity to hear from our European partners. And so I think that he has an opportunity to take a strong leadership role on behalf of the United States of America with our European partners, including the United Kingdom. And if you look at the history of sanctions in other contexts, it is often that the United States goes first and works with our partners to implement even a stronger sanction regime along with our partners to ensure that we send the right message. Now, does imposing sanctions often involve some difficulty by us and our partners in terms of who we can do business with? Yes. Is this worth it? Yes. Is it worth a little bit of economic pain for freedom? It is. And I think this is also a choice we need to ask, are we prepared to make if NATO is going to be serious? And I believe that we are prepared to take that. And what President Putin needs to understand is that the pain will be greater on Russia, and that our resolve is great. And I look forward to the President really carrying forward that resolve, and I hope that he does carry forward that resolve in terms of where we go from here.
No, I think it's a great question, and you've hit right on it. Europe and Ukraine are directly tied to Russia on energy policy, and we are in a position where if we took bilateral action, there are some steps that we could take that would damage our allies collaterally. And so we have tried, and I know the President's approach to this has been an approach that's been thoughtful with excessive care to not damage Ukraine, not compromise the position of our neighbors in Europe who have fuel agreements with Russia right now, and to sort of let them, we don't want to get ahead of them. We would like to act together. And you're right, if there's any broad financial efforts, and I think we have some options available to us, they won't work unless Britain is on board, unless the European Central Bank is on board, because whatever we put in place, whether it's through Treasury or through the Federal Reserve Bank, the Russians, if able, will try to go to another source of currency exchange, or depending on whatever measure we take. We have to make sure that it's a full frontal effort on the part of our central banks to take punitive action against Russia. So you're absolutely right. But I think in acting, we have to act with our allies, with the Ukraine, with the European nations, with our NATO partners. But indeed, we have to act.
I could say one thing about one of the subjects you raised. This is not about President Obama or Democrats or Republicans. We are Democrats and we are Republicans standing here. And this is a bipartisan effort. This is the united people of the United States standing with the united people who are our friends and brothers and sisters in Ukraine. We applaud the steps taken so far on the sanctions by the president, and we want to try to be of assistance and help in making sure that our policy is strong and effective and can create for the families here in Ukraine a life with peace, with a good job, where their children can go into the Maidan, where they can walk down the street without the fears of being shot by snipers on buildings.
Yes, ma'am. Hi. Hi, Kathy. How are you?
Hold on just a second.
Today, General Breedlove, the NATO commander, said in Brussels that the Russian threat is very, very serious, with troops massing on the east, and that they could very easily have the strength to go through Ukraine to Transnistria. And all of the things being discussed are long term. I mean, what happens in the short term? How can that kind of conflict, that kind of invasion, even be averted?
Well, I think it can be averted, even though obviously the full implementation of sanctions, as well as looking longer term to our energy policy, those are longer term issues in the sense that it does take some time. But I think that we can avert it by clearly communicating now that we are prepared to immediately take those steps. We have an opportunity, I think, this week to make, the president does, to make an announcement along with our partners in NATO, what additional steps will be taken, and to communicate clearly with Vladimir Putin so that he may have a short-term gain, but it will be a long-term losing proposition for him. And I believe that he can not only look in the short term, but he has to look in the longer term in terms of the impact on the Russian economy, in terms of the impact of Russia's role in the world with other countries, and how he will be perceived, because certainly I believe that he will stand alone in where he is. And so this, to me, are the steps that we can take that are appropriate. We do, though, have the ability in the shorter term. Certainly, we have already had the USS Truxtun doing exercises. We've already moved F-16s, to have exercises in the area. We have the ability with NATO forces, certainly, to move force posture in the area. We're not looking for a conflict, a military conflict, obviously, with Russia. However, the situation in terms of the economic impact we can have, that could have a very significant impact on Russia. So I believe that President Putin will have to look at the longer term impact on his economic strength. And this has to be viewed also in light of the conditions in the Russian economy right now. And I believe that sanctions can hurt their economic growth significantly, and that their economy, it is so based on the energy sector and is not diversified, that, for example, if we were to decide to impose collectively some energy sanctions, that could have a very significant impact on him fairly quickly. And even the signal of the announcement of sanctions can have an impact on the markets that can have an impact on his economy in the very short term.
This is a decision being made by one man. And he will make that decision, and I mean Vladimir Putin. That is not a decision being made by everybody else in the country. This is one person. We've been told that time after time today. And he is going to have to explain, this will not be Crimea. There will be horrific loss of life. There will be young Russian men who will be killed in this effort. And he will have to look their moms and dads in the eyes and explain to them why their son was lost or their daughter was lost in the invasion of another country. And so we are shoulder to shoulder. We have laid out for you some of the steps that we think will be prudent and helpful, and hopefully send a message to Mr. Putin that a wiser, more sane, more calm look at this would tell him that this is the time to try to withdraw, to draw back, and to use some common sense and try to work with the community of nations again. He is completely isolated. He has completely isolated his country, and that's not a good place to be.
Let me just quickly, I agree with the premise that's been put forward by the questioner. I think all indications are that that military action on part of the Russians is anticipated in eastern Ukraine. We take no comfort in the assurances that these are military exercises. That's what they said in Crimea. We don't believe that anything that comes out of the leadership in Russia right now is trustworthy or reliable. So our position is to try to, you can hope for the best, but you've got to prepare for the worst. And if there's one stark difference over the past few weeks, it's been that I've seen is in the resolute nature of our neighbors to reset their assessment of Russia and their intentions. From Poland to Estonia, obviously here in the Ukraine, Latvia, Lithuania, all those countries are on high alert status, and as you know, in Poland, they've taken a whole new view of the need for NATO protection and for force protection in Poland. And so I think people are seeing Vladimir Putin for who he really is. And I think that nothing sharpens the senses like a threat imposed upon your sovereignty, such as Russia now presents to a lot of nations along its border and along the border with Ukraine. So we're going to capitalize on that. We're going to try to bring people together and make sure that we have a cogent response. They've won the Battle of Crimea for now. And they may be anticipating going into eastern Ukraine tomorrow. But this won't be a short battle. This will be something long-term, and we're sure that our neighbors in NATO and democratic-loving nations will stand together in the long run.
Thank you.
Доброго дня. Мокринюк Сергій, Кримська республіканська організація політичної партії Демократичний альянс.
They're right there.
Мокринюк Сергій, Кримська республіканська організація політичної партії Демократичний альянс, я її керівник. Я родился в Крыму, я вырос в Крыму, я женился в Крыму, там родились мои дети. Я 35 лет прожил в Крыму. Сегодня я вынужден был вместе со своей семьей оттуда выехать и жить здесь. Когда был подписан Будапештский договор, то страны-гаранты взяли на себя обязательства. У меня вопрос, когда, я как юрист, задаю этот вопрос, как крымчанин, как русский, как гражданин Украины, когда я смогу прийти домой и спать дома, когда Соединенные Штаты выполнят свою обязанность по этому договору гарантировать ненарушение суверенитета Украины. Мы сегодня не можем говорить об опасности нарушения суверенитета, мы говорим об отсутствии, об нарушении. Крыма нет, я не могу там жить. Спасибо.
Let me just say that we will never accept the Russian occupation of Crimea. It is in violation of the Budapest Memorandum. It is illegal, and this illegal occupation and invasion will never be accepted by the United States of America or our international partners. Do we need to translate our CAO?
I guess, let me, let's,
I don't know if we, so what I would say to you in terms of our actions, we will stand by the Budapest Memorandum. We won't accept this annexation, and it may take time, but I believe that eventually Russia will be alienated by this, that they will feel the pain of this illegal annexation, and that we are prepared, even longer term, to find a day when you can return to Crimea, because we will not accept Crimea as anything but within the sovereignty of the Ukraine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.